Oh, what are we gonna do when we get back?
Oh, what are we gonna do when we get back?
I'll take a shower and hit the rack.
I'll take a shower and hit the rack.
Welcome to Charlie Mike. If you're a combat veteran with an entrepreneurial bug and want to know what highly successful combat veteranpreneurs are doing to transform their sacrifice and experience to create their visual reality, then this is dedicated to your inspiring and fulfilling future. And now your host, Dwayne Paro.
No way, gotta run, feet, lots of fun.
Invest in Yourself ebook is my free gift to you for listening to the show and becoming part of the CO Nation. To receive your free gift, please go to landmarklifecoaching.com. Thank you for joining us on this special edition episode. There are so many courageous champions who support our veterans that do it purely out of admiration and love for the sacrifice and service exemplified by our veterans. Not for credit, not for recognition, and not for money. These courageous champions stand in the shadows of our veterans and do all they can to help them make their futures fulfilling and empowering, because that's what each and every veteran deserves. Our guest today is Dan Frank. Dan is the CEO of 3 Wire Systems and oversees the operations and strategic direction for the company. In 2007, the company created the VetAdvisor program to provide proactive preventative care for military veterans, supporting them throughout their journey by managing behavioral health, wellness, financial, and employment issues. The VetAdvisor interactive platform incorporates personalized goal setting and high-tech biometric and social feedback, coupled with real-time, high-touch personalized coaching. VetAdvisor drives greater veteran engagement, productivity, and workplace retention. VetAdvisor comprehensively supports veterans with complex conditions by fostering a culture of emotional wellness as part of our holistic health strategy. Dan was named a finalist in the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in both 2012 and 2013 for Greater Washington. The award recognizes outstanding entrepreneurs who demonstrate excellence and extraordinary success in such areas as innovation, financial performance, and personal commitment to their business and community. Additionally, Dan was selected as the 2009 Veteranpreneur of the Year by the National Veteran-Owned Business Association and won an honorable mention from the Department of Veteran Affairs Center for Veterans Enterprises as the 2008 Enterprising Veteran of the Year. All right, well, welcome to the show, Dan. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Enjoyed being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you tell our listeners all about your journey from as a veteran to a successful entrepreneur. But before we get into the entrepreneurial experience, could you give us an overview of your military experience?
Sure. Started when I graduated college a long time ago, back in 1983. Decided that I wanted to be a naval aviator and ended up attending what was called back then Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida. Finished that, went through flight school, and then was ultimately assigned to fly the Prowlers, which are the EA-6B Prowler electronic warfare aircraft. Ended up going up outside Seattle was our home base, and then carrier duty for 3 years, and I did two cruises, one into the Mediterranean and then the other into the Western Pacific, followed by a 3-year shore duty in Honolulu, Hawaii. And after 8 years of active duty, I got out and joined the private sector civilian workforce.
All right, well, awesome. So when you transitioned out, what was that like? Did you go straight into creating businesses, or did you do something in between?
So I did something in between. I was living in Honolulu, and through networking found an opportunity through a large consulting firm called KPMG, which ended up taking me up to San Francisco. And although it was a large consulting company, the practice that I worked within was pretty small. We did airport and aviation consulting, and I joined that practice. Stayed with them about 3 years, and that was an interesting time for me. I remember going through a number of emotional ups and downs, from the very positive to the not so positive. So that kind of incorporated the gamut of, wow, I'm sitting here in a suit in a nice office, nice digs, working with different people that had very little background with the military. Didn't really understand where I came from or what I was about. So it was kind of one of these emotional things that were taking place that after serving 8 years of active duty and moving at warp speed and the high operating tempo to get into the civilian world was definitely a learning experience for me. One of the things I remember was not having back in those days, of course, we used stickers on cars, to get on the base, and not having a sticker, I just kind of felt naked. I don't know why. So I ended up joining the reserve. I wanted a sticker on my car. I wanted to be able to get on the base. I wanted to continue to have that brotherhood. So that was kind of the initial part of my transition out of the military.
Awesome. Yeah. So how did you kind of navigate from there? So you went into the reserves after a period of time, and how kind of
yeah. So I was in that job for 3 years, and fortunately, I had a really good boss who recognized that I just wasn't a good fit in the company. It was a lot of spreadsheet work, a lot of writing, and although I could do those things pretty well, I had a whole different personality about what I wanted to do and how to do it. And so he helped me transition out of that job and look for my next career step, which was getting into the technology business. And I'll get to that in a moment. While I was doing that in parallel, I served in reserve out at Naval Air Station Alameda, which was just across the bay from San Francisco. Didn't really do anything outstanding in my reserve capacity there, just showed up and drilled a couple of times a month. And ultimately, I only spent about 5 years in the Red Reserve and got out. But the transition from my first job at KPMG into the technology world was kind of set the path for me and where I am today. Of course, not knowing those things back then, you tend to get frustrated and not understand how the road works because I spent that 8 years of active duty, and I looked left and right at my peers, and I thought, oh my gosh, these guys, they have 8 years of private sector experience on me. How am I ever going to catch up with these guys? So, whereas the military definitely has its strengths and teaches you many different things that your civilian counterparts don't have, well, at least when I transitioned, I looked, again, like I said, left and right and felt that I was behind. I also remember one very key thing happened to me. I was reading I was back in those days, I read a lot of, it's called Aviation Week in Space Technology, because I like to stay up on the military aviation things. And I read about a guy who I was with in flight school who was named an astronaut. And so here I was kind of looking left and right and feeling behind with my peers in my civilian job. And then I looked, reading about a guy that I went to flight school with, and now he's an astronaut. So I had this feeling of, okay, did I make the right move? Am I going to succeed? How do I break through? And those feelings were going through my head quite often.
Yeah, and that's common in the transitions too, is because we tend to compare ourselves to those that we've started with or to those that we want to be, at the level they're at, and it tends to actually slow our progress because we're more focused on what they're doing than what we should be doing. And it also, is a little bit demotivating to think, all right, why am I not there where they're at? And then we just all have different circumstances that lead to that and different choices and things like that. So, yeah, that's very common as veterans transition and get into, trying to recreate or figure out, who they're going to be. And that's one thing that I always talk to veterans about is no need to recreate who you are. Just understand the strengths you are bringing from the military that are unmatched in the civilian side, and use that as your leverage where you're going to be an immediate contributor and be able to take an organization to that next level.
Yeah, agreed. I think today is a lot different. I got out of the military quite a while ago in the early the early 90s. And, this is obviously pre 9/11. And so I think there's although it's still severely lacking, there's a bit more understanding about the veterans and military just because how the press discusses it, whether it's veteran unemployment or things of that nature versus back in the early 90s when it was nobody really, it was just the end of the Cold War. It really wasn't much of a topic back then because the United States just wasn't doing as much in combat back then. One of the things that just as one of my pet, I guess, pieces of advice is I wrote a short blog piece on this. It's on my LinkedIn profile. The title of it is "Veterans Should Quickly Leave Their Initial Post-Military Job." I think that that advice is you're not going to find the perfect thing your first time out. Most veterans leave their first job after the military within 12 months. That's what statistics show, and I think that's okay because it's going to take a while to find the thing that you really want to do and that you're good at, and that there's no prize for staying with the first job you get out of the military for the rest of your life or for 20 years. You just don't need to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
In my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Most will bounce on the first one or two positions that they find, and what they're doing is they're learning exactly what they want and don't want, and so that's a good thing because then when you'll know when you find the right one. I kind of equate it to when you're house hunting, you just kind of know when you walk in, you're like, yep, this is the one, and there's no second guessing and there's no what ifs. So as you went through your career, let's kind of jump into how you decided to get into being an entrepreneur.
Sure. So it really started almost from day one of my new job. Once I left the military, I kept coming up with ideas about, hey, maybe we should try this, maybe we should do that, and I'd take them to my management. And looking back, rightly so, they said no, we don't want to do that. But I had that kind of burning desire to come up with new ideas. I think the second thing over the course of the time that I worked for, I'll call it corporations, was rising to my level of political incompetency. So understanding how corporations work, whether they're small organizations or ultra large organizations, and the politics that take place within those types of organizations. And I just am not a good fit in those types of organizations and trying to understand the political landscape and how to maneuver within that political landscape. Mm. So my frustration led to, at the time we were living in, my wife and I and my young son were living in Sacramento, California. I had gone from worked for a couple of different software companies, and I realized I needed to do my own thing. I was walking through a state government technology conference in Sacramento at the conference center, and the equivalent of GSA or General Services Administration was for the state of California was there, and they had a sign up or something about veteran business opportunities. So I looked at that, and then I started to research that and understood that the federal government had a veteran-owned business program for what they call set-aside contracts. So started to research and become interested in this. And I fortunately had a friend who lived in Washington, D.C., who had been involved in government contracting in the technology area for his whole career. Got some advice from him. And over the course of about 2 years, researching this and trying to figure it all out, my wife and I decided we would jump off the bridge, and we sold our house in Sacramento in 2006, and then moved to Washington, D.C., bought a house in Falls Church, and started a company called 3Wire. And the intent was I was going to be a service disabled veteran-owned small business in the technology area, and that's how I was going to make my way in the world.
Awesome. Yeah. So did you bootstrap that effort, or how did you get started with it?
Yeah. So good question. So I was a lot of luck. Where they say timing and opportunity meet, right? Mm-hmm. Hard work, timing, opportunity meet his luck. So sold the house at the top of the market, real estate market before the crash in 2006. Had from the proceeds of the sale, had about, let's call it $100,000 to live on. My wife was pregnant with my second son, which she gave birth to shortly after we arrived in Falls Church. So I had an infant and a 6-year-old, and of course her, and the $100,000 to bootstrap, to live on, and to bootstrap the company. And so sometimes ignorance is bliss, or fat, dumb, and happy is a good place to be. Knowing what I know today, would I have done this? Gee, I don't know. I mean, the audacity of moving 3,000 miles and starting a business and not really knowing anybody in town except a handful of people, and you can go on and on and on. Mm-hmm. But in any event, I made it work. So that's how I bootstrapped the company, was the sale of the house, and then we bought a place in Falls Church, Virginia, at the height of the market too. So we lost a little bit of money on it. The real estate came back, but it wasn't all perfect.
Yeah, no, that's a great story for people to hear, though. Sometimes you gotta take that high risk for the high reward, and so you guys basically rolled the dice, put it all on the line to go all in. And from a lot of things that I've studied and read on entrepreneurship, until you really go all in, you don't really realize the true potential that you have to grow the business, because you're not distracted anymore by, say, a day job, or you're not distracted because you have some level of safety in something else. And so it forces you to be hypersensitive and focused on building that business.
Yeah, that's agree 3,000% with that. Eventually, you can sit and pound this. You can have your day job and sit and pound the spreadsheets at night and write business plans and do all the research. But until you jump off the bridge, you're just not going to do it. So, jumping off the bridge, selling your house, moving 3,000 miles, having an infant, all great ways to make sure that you're fired up in the morning and ensuring that every minute of every day you're optimizing to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely it's really the way to do it. It's just hard for people to fathom that. So so especially if I'll use the term quote unquote young, not married, no kids. You really don't have any, you don't have any excuse. If you're living, you got your Corvette in your apartment, sell your Corvette, whatever you got. And you don't realize how unencumbered you are at some points in your life. And then as you get older and things get more complex and you have a family, you have young kids, you have the mortgage, it just gets harder and harder. So for those that are separating and presumably on the younger side and less encumbered, take advantage of those times. Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. So let's see. We're going to go ahead here and take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to get more into some of the other entrepreneurial efforts that Dan has launched since he did 3-Wire Systems. So we'll be right back. Landmark Life Coaching's vision is to be the nation's premier coaching partner for inspiring and empowering those in transition. They partner with courageous groundbreakers and transitioning veterans to create fulfilling and empowering futures that they desire. They have partnered with various entrepreneurs and transitioning veterans to leverage their core strengths and implement the framework for the future they always dreamed of. Could you or anyone you know benefit from a success partner to bring clarity to your future or their future? If so, please check out landmarklifecoaching.com for more information and charliemikepodcast.com for the Charlie Mike Podcast, showcasing the successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Okay, we are back with Dan Franks from 3-Wire Systems. He was giving us a really good rundown of his military experience, his transition out of the military, and how him and his wife just decided to go all in to start the business that they've created and been extremely successful with. So, Dan, like other entrepreneurs, has branched out, has other entrepreneurial endeavors that he has launched as well. One of them being VetAdvisor, which is a highly successful veteran support program for coaching veterans that are in transition or in need of support. So, Dan, as you guys had launched 3Wire, at what point did you decide you wanted to branch out and go into creating the VetAdvisor entity?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. So just from a context point of view, VetAdvisor is part of 3Wire. It's a brand under 3Wire, and I'll tell you how it all started. As I mentioned before the break, I started 3Wire to be a technology company. Now, when I say that, at that point I didn't really know what that meant, but things work themselves out. Shortly after starting the company, I was approached by a large healthcare concern, and they wanted to know if I was interested in doing priming a set-aside contract that the VA was putting out. And at first I said, a couple lessons learned here. First is that I met that healthcare company while I was working in Sacramento. I had approached them to help me out on a couple of different projects, and they politely said no. But a year or 2 years later, the magic happened between us. And so there's another lessons learned is that, hey, if it doesn't happen right away, maybe something in the future after you meet somebody or some company, it'll happen. It'll take place. So that was the first lesson learned. The second lesson learned out of this was I almost said no to doing this proposal with them because I figured I was focused more on my technology business and I didn't want to dilute myself in my focus. But I ended up saying yes, and we ended up winning the contract. And the contract at that time in 2007 was to provide the fancy, they call it tele-behavioral health services to veterans in the Midwest, which really meant using the telephone to have what we called coaches working with veterans about various issues, problems that they were facing in their life. And so we won it out of the blue, so that we got, again, another luck thing, being in the right place at the right time, and that launched what we ended up calling that contract VetAdvisor, and that ended up being the beginning or the genesis of our brand about what we do to help veterans. So that's how that started.
Nice. Yeah, that's an interesting opportunity to, then create, even though it's a part of your greater company, it's, it is entrepreneurial in nature, like you said, because it wasn't straight up technology like you had intended 3Wire to be when you started out. So, you had to be innovative and think about, okay, how are we going to help solve this problem with this type of service. And from what I've learned through Jennifer Roseman, who you have leading the charge on VetAdvisor, it's amazing the amount of technology you guys have incorporated into being able to support veterans through your coaching services.
Right. So here's where the tie-in comes from. Our technology experience and the social service experience was the first thing we learned. The VA it was a VA contract, and the VA had a very distinct view of what they were trying to do, which was, it's all about clinical behavioral health problems. And what we found is that that's not really the case, that it's really the stuff all of us face on a daily basis, whether you're a veteran or not. It's finances, it's careers, it's family, it's in some cases substance abuse. There could be some behavioral health, clinical issues involved as well. But you take a mix of these things, and that's why in the beginning, Dwayne, when you read through what VetAdvisor does, at the end of the day, it just boils down to taking all the different things that impact somebody's life and looking at it from a holistic point of view, rather than trying to say, well, if you need financial help, go over here. If you need help on careers, go over here. If you need help on behavioral health, go over here. And trying to put it into looking at the person through one lens. And we then realized this was back when fitness trackers. I guess it was Fitbit came on the market first, and other products that started to measure sleep. We realized that sleep was a huge component and a great non-stigmatizing gateway into talking to somebody, especially veterans, about problems. And so if we could do sleep coaching, we would be able to keep it non-stigmatizing. And a lot of people talk about their problems and not being able to sleep, and then starting to kind of peel back the onion and seeing why there are problems with sleep. So that led us to, okay, can we suck in, can we consume data from a Fitbit? Can we consume data from other non-medical devices and feed our system, which we call our advisor outcome platform, which is essentially the case management aspect of the program. Now, what we thought is that in most instances, case management systems are comprised of data that's entered, but nothing happens with that data. So it's what I call dead data. And so they got the question about, well, what if we could make correlations about data, whether it's sleep or weight control, exercise activities, questionnaires that our clients would take from time to time, and try to get to the point where we could predict human behavior. And that, we haven't reached the holy grail of that yet, but I think that it's a very interesting field for us in taking a look at data and how to interpret data, especially in the context of whether it's active duty or people that are veterans.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting. I think that it actually helps shape the right kind of programs for treatment for people versus just going to a pharmaceutical conclusion,
right,
or leaving things untreated because somebody doesn't want a pharmaceutical solution. So some of the solutions I've seen for different organizations that are working to help veterans is pretty phenomenal. The things they're coming up with, and the concept of tying technology in to actually take data that's there or that can easily be collected and making sense out of that is pretty phenomenal and important to the future of veteran care. So I applaud you guys on how you're doing that. That's very innovative thing to do, and brings solutions that people are more open to. And
right.
So, yeah. Yeah, so that's all really good stuff. So I would highly encourage our listeners, if you haven't listened to the episode we did with Jennifer Roseman a few weeks back, to click on that one as well and listen to the in-depth overview she gave of VetAdvisor as a direct leader of that part of the organization for Dan. She has some amazing background and insight into things that are very important to veterans for treatment. So, all right. Well, this has been great, Dan. I really appreciate your time. And as we're coming to a close here, I wanted to give you an opportunity to let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you or learn more about your business.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dan Frank. I'm the CEO of 3Wire. Our website is 3wiresys.com. So 3THREEWIRE, and then sys like system, SYS.com. 3wiresys.com is our website. You can tweet me at DanFrank7. I'm not a millennial. What else should I tell Dwayne as far as contact?
Yeah, if you're probably on LinkedIn, be a great place
LinkedIn,
to.
Yes,
LinkedIn's always a great place to contact him professionally. So we will put that in the show notes as well. A link to Dan's profile for LinkedIn, his website, and the other information that he had provided. So it'll be easily accessible in the show notes as well. So. All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and most importantly, thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne, and you as well. And happy Veterans Day. It's only 2 days away.
That's right.
I think just in passing or parting shot here is that there's no better time to be a veteran in the United States. There's so many great programs to take advantage of. The Forever GI Bill, as an example. I'm sure there's problems getting service and things like that, but there's so many people that want to help. So take advantage of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Remember, loyal listeners, we are the home of the free because of the brave.
Thank you for tuning in to Charlie Mike Podcast with Dwayne Paro. Our objective is to bring successful veteranpreneurs to help inspire and provide insight into what helped them become successful, with the hopes you can take away various strategies you can implement in your entrepreneurial journey. Visit us on iTunes, leave us a rating and review, and let us know what you thought of the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hoorah!